What is going on, everybody? As you can see, that is a new intro. I was playing around with some stuff the other day, and I was like, I think I got a cut app or something. I could create some little intro for us. But we are back with another C3 monthly conversation, and of course, I am back with none other than Karen, who is going to get people acclimated and to what C3 is all about. Karen, what's up?
What's up, Lawrence? I love that new intro. Thanks for creating it. I like it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so welcome to the August, right? It's August.
It's August.
August answer the call to conscious leadership event. And if you aren't familiar with C3, then please get familiar with C3, especially if you are somebody who is or aspires to be a conscious leader in corporate America, somebody or even internationally, who wants to see the corporate landscape elevate to a more conscious level, where we're more self-aware and aware of all the impacts that leadership can have on people, on the planet, where we can, prioritize profit alongside people on the planet. And this is where we discuss a wide range of topics related to conscious leadership as voted on by our C3 community. This month, we're talking about the return to office and hybrid work and how hybrid work can work. And this was something that came up in polls past. And I believe actually the winner of the poll was not this topic, but we will be covering that topic in the next month. It was speaking opportunities. What we want to do with C3 is to give people the mic. That's why you'll see underneath my name it says grab the mic, because this month, Spring Richardson Perry is grabbing the mic to talk about return to office and hybrid work. And we want this community to be a place where if you're an expert in some topic related to conscious leadership, if you have, tried, applied, teach, facilitate these practices around conscious leadership, we want you here. We want you sharing that. We want to spread conscious leadership practices throughout the world and make it a make consciousness cool. We're going to make consciousness cool and make it the norm and make it something that other people know how to model and follow. So yeah, as Lawrence just popped up, if you're listening, if you're watching, join us, ask some questions, interact with us, comment, question, all of that. We definitely welcome that. So Spring Richardson Perry is her organizational leadership and career coaching firm is called Time to Spring Forward. And she's going to tell us why return to office is something that does or does not relate to springing forward to the future and how hybrid work can work. Thanks for joining us, Spring.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that. Just a little bit about me. Like Karen said, Time to Spring Forward is my company, and what we do, we have coaching and consulting. On the consulting side, we do organizational effectiveness and strategic planning. And so I go in, work with organizations as they're trying to figure things out, help them operate more efficiently, but also plan for the future. And then on the coaching side, I do career coaching. There's a portion of coaching that goes into the consulting side with the leadership development, but it looks a lot different on the just plain coaching side with me working with clients directly. And so I'm really excited that we're talking about this return to office here because as an entrepreneur, a mompreneur, actually, this is near and dear to my heart. And so, during the pandemic, we were locked down. We couldn't go anywhere. So we had to figure out how we were still going to be productive without being able to leave our homes. And so there were organizations that were already allowing work from home, kind of dabbling in it, getting their feet wet with it. And so when the pandemic happened, everything shut down. They were like, okay, well, we got to put this into effect ASAP. So let's figure this out. So everyone started working from home. It was a thing. People were actually loving it even after the pandemic. But then when things started to open up again, companies were like, oh, well, we need to get back to the office. We don't have to be at home anymore. Let's get back to the way things were. Well, nothing is as it was prior to 2020. Um, Everybody's lives were essentially turned upside down. Work from home provided some much needed flexibility to everyone, not just moms, not just dads, but people in general who have lives and who doesn't have a life outside of work, right? So, especially someone like me, for instance, I have a newborn. She is 4 months. She just turned 4 months on the 25th. So being able to work from home for me is a game changer because I can say do some laundry in between meetings. I can start dinner for the kids just before I go to pick them up. These are things that I wouldn't have access to if I were in my office. And I am more productive for me, for myself, at home where I don't have the distractions of coworkers and that that what do we call it? The water cooler gossip, where you go and you were intending to just run and get some water, and an hour later you get back to your desk to do whatever it is that you needed to do. So, it actually showed in a lot of different articles. There were a lot of different articles that came out to say that people were actually more productive. Oh, and there's a little one. um, it actually was. Babe, can you come get her for a second? So my husband works from home too. So we. Sorry about that, guys. We but we my husband and I both are extremely productive and a lot more productive being at home. And these articles that were written were proof that, I'm going to drop some of them in the chat for you guys so that y'all can take a look at it, that people were more productive at home because they had this flexibility to really be able to do multiple things at home instead of being stuck in the office, and you're thinking about all the different things that you could be doing that need to be done when you get off of work. And so you're like, oh, kind of resenting being in the office almost, and you're not getting as much done. Here's one I'm going to put in here. This was about Allstate, which I was really excited to hear about what they did. They decided to permanently get rid of having to work in a physical location. So they've sort of they've sold some of their real estate in different places, but in their major metropolitan areas. So like in Austin, San Antonio, in these major cities, they have an office. So if you work in somewhere that's outside of these major cities where you want to go into the office, you still maybe have like an hour or so commute. They made it to make sure that their people still have access to the office to get supplies and all these other things if they want to, but that they could get there and they could still have use of the office, but still work from home if they want to. And so these are the things to me that shows that companies are listening. The leaders hear us. They hear what we're saying because, people, again, have proven that they are productive outside of having to go into an office. Who is this really serving? Us being in an office. Executives think that, oh, we need to have a culture. Like culture is dependent on us all being together. And you can have a retreat where everyone comes together once or twice a year, so that you can have that team building, that in-person camaraderie that you still want to foster. But having a remote team is helps everyone too. But still, if you want to have that office where everyone can go into and still have access to being around others, because you feel like maybe that collaboration helps whatever it is that you're trying to do for your particular organization, that's possible as well. There's just so many options without having to make people be in the office all the time.
Yeah, it's funny. So here's the myth about hybrid work and with this. It's so funny. Return to work. Um, I did it back in 2016 as working as at a telecommunications organization where we had two, and again, flex days, right? And the funny thing about that is the articles were out then about people's productivity levels back then. And again, in those articles in 2016 were 3 or 4 years old about how productive people can be in that hybrid work. And I also remember, as someone who worked from home for 2 days a week, I logged in earlier and logged off later. And that's actually one of the things that the articles, and of course we're going to drop that article from Allstate that also was proven in couple actually having clients where their customer support teams, you actually hit on a big one, is the distraction that gets removed from actually being in the office. And so all this fear mongering and gaslighting of people are more productive when they're around each other. No, they're not. You don't got nobody drive buying you no more. And I had the rule of two, right? 2 minutes. If I was gonna go talk to somebody in the office, I had 2 minutes. But everybody doesn't have a rule of two. Some people got rule of 20 minutes at this person desk, 20 minutes. And like you said, next thing you know, it's lunchtime. And I came in at 9, right? And I actually knew those people who I used to be like, I got stuff to do, walk away. Right. And so I think you hit something there in a real time example of, hey, life's, you got a baby, you got your husband, like that. We can't script that. We couldn't have made that up if we wanted to have a real life example of people being human and things happening. And so as you think about it from an organizational effectiveness perspective, how are you helping organizations kind of keep the main thing? If they really want to be effective, it's about taking care of the people. So what have you been coaching people on these days to make them kind of reframe their myths about return to work?
So I think the biggest thing here is, number one, you need to understand your team, your workforce. What are their needs? What are the things that, because what I'm finding is that when leaders are putting these things in place, leaders of organizations are putting these return to office mandates back in place, they've not once asked their employees what they need, because in their mind, they're used to making these executive decisions for the good of the company, and they've not had to access their employees' thoughts or opinions on certain things, because they're making the decisions at the top that is going to be best for the organization. So in their mind, I call the shots, and I see it as being better here for the organization. This is better because of X, Y, and Z. And I say, well, but who is it better for? If you want to serve your clients, your customers better, you need your employees at their best to do so. So if you need them at their best, ask your employees what is best for them to serve your clients, your customers. And that's where we start to unpack all of this. That's where they sit back and they're like, huh, okay, let me really think about this. Then we put a survey out so that we can survey the employees, find out what they want, find out how they feel they work best. Do they want to be in an office? If they do, how many days a week do they want to be in the office? Do they want to be in the office 5 days a week? Or do they want to have the opportunity to be in the office maybe 2 to 3 days a week and then be at home the other days of the week? Find out what it is that they really want and how you can give it to them to still be productive.
What a novel idea. Actually asking asking your workforce what they want. Wow, who'd have thunk it? I mean, of course, right? You hit on so many different, reasons why this hybrid or even completely remote workforces work. I mean, let's just talk about what we started out with, which is equity for working moms. Okay, like moms. I'm a mom. I have worked from home in my own company since my kids were born. And actually, Lawrence, I worked for an IT and clinical consulting firm that offered us the ability to work remote because I'm up in Philly, so we get snow, right? To work remotely. I remember, having Citrix on my computer, my really old computer, and being able to work remotely in 2000. I think it started in 2004. We were able to work remotely when it snowed. If we were sick, so that we didn't get other employees sick when we're sick, pending we had a voice to work since I was a recruiter and our job was on the phone all day. And working in an office with a bunch of other people on the phone all day, not everybody operates really well under those conditions. We talked about I'll call it emotional waste because Cyweek, and then we'll call it that, right? The 2.5 hours per employee per day on emotional waste, just the drama, the it's not always emotional waste. Sometimes it's just socialization, and there are going to be people in the organization who need people. Okay, but these are needs that can be fulfilled in other ways, as Spring was saying. Like, okay, now we know that this cohort needs some kind of interaction. How can we do that? You talked about the fact that you can relinquish your brick and mortar, sell it, right? Use that money, use that capital for other things, for retreats, for team building exercises, for other things that can really genuinely build a culture, which is not specific on being a person. And there's so many case studies, as you brought up, that are already proving that culture is not dependent on people in person interacting. So, I mean, and then let's just, there's, I know that there was another thing, like another checkbox in my mind, but I'm going to bounce it back to you while I think about that other checkbox in my mind. But I mean, let's just say that the benefits certainly outweigh the drawbacks of becoming a person. And that's what I wanted to say. If the executive concern is performance, and we have the data, as you said, that proves that performance is not also exclusive to being in person, right? Because high performing people will perform whether they're in person or not. They just will. So if you're nurturing high performing people, then you don't need the in person, but you also don't need spyware. So that's something related to this, remote workforce. That I know that we had metrics and we had things. We had a software that kept track of how many calls we made, how many interviews we had. We had metrics and we had systems that kept track of that. When we were working remotely, you could see when we're logging in, when we're logging out, and how many calls we're making. A database that kept track of all that. And if your metrics are aligned to your values, you don't need, and you have trust in your organization, you don't need that spyware. But that's something that I definitely wanted to bring up on this, is this idea that that executives are so worried about performance that they have to monitor keystrokes.
Let me unmute. So that right there, the statement of the year. We are so concerned about performance, micromanaging, which is really what it is, right? Is that we are monitoring keystrokes. That is absurd to me. You hire adults to do a job. Again, we're hiring adults. So let them be adults, right? There are other ways to measure performance. There are other ways to ensure that people are doing what they need to do. That is actually one of my pillars of my leadership development when I'm working with organizations on my consulting side, is understanding how to inspect what you expect, which is not micromanaging. It is setting up checkpoints either throughout the day if you need to make sure that people are on track to get whatever the project is done, whatever the task is done, or checkpoints weekly, which I always suggest in terms of making sure that everyone understands what the current goal is and how we're going to get there. And then monthly and quarterly checkpoints so that those big vision goals are still being worked towards as well. And so there's so much there's so many different things and so many different ways to go about this without having to be a micromanager, without having to use the spyware to make sure that people are doing what they say that they're going to do, that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I find that when you actually give that level of responsibility to adults, they live up to those expectations, if not exceed them. But when we are micromanaging, then people are deliberately not going to do what they want to, what they're supposed to be doing, because they're like, you're treating me like a child. I'm an adult. So now I'm going to give you something to be wary about.
Yeah.
But also, when I was looking at Lawrence's comment about 2.5 hours of time that gets spent on interactions, I'm also thinking about travel time to and from the job, right? So I can specifically remember the days when I had to leave to go to work and come home from work. You are sitting in rush hour traffic. Now, I was in New Orleans, so our rush hour traffic wasn't as bad as a Houston or a Dallas or an Atlanta or a New York or a Los Angeles. Los Angeles traffic and Houston traffic, I wouldn't, if I had to live there, I would be nuts, which is why a lot of people probably in those areas are crazy, because the traffic is unreal. And to have to be in that traffic in the morning to get to your job, in the evening to come from your job, and not to mention if you have to drop kids off at school, pick kids up after school, and then get to after school activities. But beyond that, the level of stress that invokes, and then you wonder why people are ornery on their jobs sometimes, or they snap at you, or they're just not performing at their highest level because they're tired. They've had to already, before you even get to work, you've had work, right? Because you're sitting in this traffic. I distinctly remember talking to one of my friends who recently switched jobs because of this very thing. He was in a job that wanted them there 5 days a week. During the pandemic, he set up these a bunch of different applications and different things so that they could work remotely on a long-term basis. And so when they demanded that they come back to the office, he presented to them like, hey, like I set all this up, so now we don't have to necessarily be here all the time. But they felt like, it was best for everyone to be in the office. Well, once they returned to office, once that was a mandate that everybody be back in the office 5 days a week, they had several positions that needed to be filled. They couldn't fill them because it was because people did not want to be in the office. Those positions are still open, and now his position is open because he went somewhere that will allow him to work from home at least 2 to 3 days a week, because his commute was literally 90 minutes each way, 90 minutes going there, 90 minutes getting back. And I was like, I was like taken aback by that, because I could not imagine having to travel 90 minutes in the morning just to get to work, and then 90 minutes after work to get home, only to start the second half of your day once you get there, having to cook dinner, having to help kids with homework. If they need to get to soccer practice, like one of my kids is in soccer, another's in band, another one does karate, like having to think about all of that as you're driving home, how you're going to get there on time. I mean, that's nuts to me. When at home, we are much more productive. Like Lawrence said, you logging in earlier, you're logging out later, because you don't have to worry about, oh, I got to hurry up and leave so I miss this traffic, or I can get to where I need to be next. You're way more productive. And it just amazes me that everyone doesn't see how beneficial this flexibility really is.
I think it's, man, that you, and again, it's so simple, it's crazy. Um, but I think also what I'm seeing in a lot of leaders as well is the new biases that creep up because of some, okay, an organization says yes to hybrid, and now these biases of kind of, and again, it's almost that attention to clicks, attention to, well, I sent you that, well, you're at home, why didn't you respond faster? And that unconscious thing that happens in our head because people are at home, that we're glued to our laptops, which I've even know some, not gonna name them, have written policies that are so restrictive about what a human adult can do while they're at home working. And again, it's now, and again, this is the divide of church and state, or you trying to govern my life. You need to have a quiet space, you need to have a space free from distractions. You at home is not daycare. If you need child, like literally getting into the weeds of things, to the extent of, yes, we not everybody has children, so it's unfair that you have your kids at home with you, like, and started really and like what did they say, that people started saying the quiet parts out loud, and it's just like, no, stop it. Because now what's really happening is that those biases that creep in are really, again, core value violations. Like, you gotta brief the people, like, what is the culture? And that's where I think the hard conversation of culture suffers, because people are hybrid. No, what needs to happen is some intentionality around, okay, what is the culture we want, and then what does that mean to people? And you pulling it forward. You said it earlier, getting people involved in co-creation of culture. Like, life is different, and the research is continuing to be considered and collected by, like, there are hundreds of articles that get posted monthly about the evolving workplace. And the other part too is employers now have access to more people, and so that is and again, that didn't just start. That telecommunication organization that I worked for got thousands of resumes per position, and because they had opportunities to do remote work and all the rest of that. And so again, thinking about it from the perspective, the human perspective of, you can, and I love, yeah, that quote right there, learning how to inspect what you expect, like, that's adulting. Like, that is hardcore leadership and adulting. Like, have what you expected been communicated, and have you considered the humanity of the person you're asking to do the work? And so if your expectations are being mismanaged, then what are you inspecting? And more times than not, that's where words like micromanagement keeps coming up around. And again, the toxic nature of you asking me how long I was on lunch or where I went to lunch and all the rest of those things. Like, when it comes to just the biggest things, like the very, like, how does someone get started if they're experiencing a lot of the issues that we've been talking about? How do you get people to just land somewhere neutral to maybe relook and pivot on what's in place today?
That is a great question. Um, it's a work in progress because, how do we get people on the same page? Everybody is so different. Everybody has different experiences. Everybody has different opinions, different core values, right? So me as a mom, I embrace having your family. If we're on a meeting and one of your kids photo bombs, I'm like, hey kid, like, how's it going? But then some people, they get mad. Why is your kid at home? Why is your kid on the meeting? Like, you know what I mean? So it's hard to really have a common ground here in terms of what, how we move forward with this. But I think overall, number one, you really have to ask your employees, what do they need? What works best for them? and then go from there. I'm I'm also thinking about this YouTube video about this woman who she was a police officer. So it was a combination of like being in the office at the precinct, a combination of being out in the field, and then sort of everything in between. And um, they were able to clock in from their phones, you know, in case they were like out, had to go out in the field or something like that to start their day off. And this particular person had abused that privilege. Um, and so the leader handled it beautifully because, you know, the leader said, okay, ask the person if they understood what the policy was. So like, you know, okay, so what is our policy about this, about clocking in, and, you know, how do we typically handle that? So the person who was under scrutiny at the moment stated the policy, and she said, okay, so if that's the policy, then, you know, why are you not following it? Why are you doing this? And so she's saying, so I'm coming to you, the leader says, I'm coming to you first before this gets escalated to tell you what the expectation is, what the policy states, and how you fit into all of this, right? And so I bring that up because, again, when we're talking about inspecting what we expect, that is the prime example of that. This is what we expected. I'm looking here and I'm looking at, you know, you were at home and you clocked in. That's not the policy because you weren't working at that time. The policy states you have to be working either here, clocking in at the office, or if you're out in the field doing something, you know, you would be clocking in at that time. And so you want to make sure that but what they didn't do was micromanage her. They weren't they weren't like, um, you know, watching clicks or watching her or anything like that. It just so happened that something happened and this person wasn't where they said that they were going to be. So it brought up like a history of, okay, so where were they at this time? Where were they at that time? So when they actually started to look at everything, then they were like, oh, well, we need to call her in and make sure she understands what the policy is and how this works. And moving forward, this is what's going to happen. And that's what we need to do, right? We don't need to be micromanaging people. If something happens and you need to address the situation at that time to make sure that you are very clear on what the expectations are, what the policy is, how things work, that's when you go about to make sure and say, this is the policy, this is what we expect, this is what has been going on, but this is what I expect moving forward, and then go from there. If it is violated at that time, and then you've already communicated what is going to happen, then as an adult, these are the consequences, and it is what it is. So, but there's no reason that we need to be making these blanket rules because one person out of 1,000 people violates it. And then we're saying, oh, well, we had issues in the past. You had one issue, one person, and now we're making these blanket rules, these blanket statements that really don't work for anybody.
And in your example, it's more of like an early alert system, right? It's really just like I think there's something we have to course correct here. We have to recommunicate or whatever it is. And you might find out that the person had something going on, you know, and as a leader, that's something you want to be able to learn ahead of time. I mean, hopefully you're having regular check-ins with your people anyway. And when you have 2.5 hours less of just emotional waste plus no commute, leaders have more time to actually get with their people one-on-one, so you can actually be a better leader in that environment. And talking about the environment, I mean, there's obviously environmental things here. If all these people are off the roads, they're not commuting, they're not spewing their CO2 in the air with their cars. You know, there's the humanity. We talked about humanity. Okay, well, why wouldn't we want parents to be more accessible to their kids for the future's sake? You know what I mean? Like, what does the world look like if we have two parents not just working, you know, full-time jobs, sometimes side gigs, sometimes that? What happens to these kids when they grow up? Maybe they'll be like Gen Xers and become, you know, independent. I don't know. But but maybe we need to be that much more accessible to our kids. Maybe it's actually better for the future of the world if we do that.
Yeah, I also see it too. Right, and us as consultants, coaches, leadership folks, conscious folks, it's an opportunity for us to, I'm gonna say it out loud. I'm gonna say the quiet part out loud too. It's an opportunity for us to make more money because these employers gonna keep us employed because this is a change management project if I ever seen one for a lot of these organizations, and just leaning into, yet again, not feeling like they have to know. But what you described, Spring, what I know Karen does amazingly well is partnership, right? Not believing you have to create this on your own, but really being an extension of an organization. Like, hey, nobody expects you to be perfect at this thing. Like, while you're learning, right? It's like you both as parents, right? Like, there was no, you have access to no book, or no audible or whatever else. Like, my kid rolled themselves down the steps, what do I do next? Like, there's no chapter on that. It's just, let's figure this thing out. And for organizations, I think what we're also seeing too is, what another thing that we see in leadership development is that idea that I don't want to admit that I don't know, because of all of the times as experts it was not safe not to know, or to say those things out loud for feeling less than. And so I think for a lot of these organizations, for the first time, it's giving themselves permission to practice differently, right? They knew what to do. Like, that's why I think going back to normal, whatever that means. And so I think because they're now having to do something even nuanced differently, and again, how many will admit it's freaking them out? Like, they went from being an expert and now to have to admit to somebody, and particularly, hey, I need to learn this with you, right? Which wasn't a part of a lot of these leaders' vocabulary. And I think as you think about your coaching clients and all the rest of these folks, Spring, like, what are some of their fears that they reveal to you? And again, protect the innocent and guilty. But consistently, what are the themes and trends you're hearing about what they're really having a reaction to?
It is just like you said, not necessarily not being the expert, but having to admit that, okay, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe I was wrong and I will have to try to correct that. And that wasn't, like you said, a part of the vocabulary before. I don't have to admit to being wrong because I'm the leader and I'm supposed to be the expert. And so, every decision that I make is right because I'm the expert, right? So now it's like Karen said, going back and course correcting. And how are we going to make it better moving forward? And that's one of the things that I'm trying to help leaders to see, is that it's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to learn alongside your people. That vulnerability actually makes you more of an expert in their eyes, because they don't expect you to have all the answers all the time. Because then if you do, they're like, oh, well, they just think they're a know-it-all and they don't really know anything. So that actually lessens your authority, as opposed to admitting and saying, I don't know everything. I don't know it all, but I'm here to learn. I want to learn. I want to do better. And so let's go on this journey together.
Related to the resistance to change and admitting that you don't know everything, um, I've heard the theory that all of this return to office is driven by the real estate industry. And it's actually what I see are real estate people, professionals, insinuating that. And it makes me wonder, if that's just related to, a fear of change and a resistance to reinvent themselves. Because I mean, I've read about, malls becoming nursing homes, and I mean, it seems kind of ridiculous that that would be a reason why all of these big corporations are being driven to bring their employees back against their will, when this change could be opportunity at the same time.
Well, in a mall becoming a nursing home, so no real estate has been lost in a sense. It is just being repurposed. And so that's what we need to do, is reframe our mind and reframe our thinking, because even though a lot of brick and mortar things are like malls and things like that are kind of becoming a thing in the past, but not really, because people still want to get out and they still want to do things. So they still need somewhere to go. However, we just need to reimagine how we do these things, what these things are used for. Again, like you said, a mall turning into a nursing home. Well, the real estate itself is not being lost. We're not tearing the building down. It is simply being repurposed. So that transaction is still happening, where if I'm a realtor, I need to sell this real estate now to someone who wants to make it into a nursing home or whatever that next thing is. But we just have to think outside of the box. And I think for me, why I'm so comfortable in this time is because I've always been this out of the box thinker, but that wasn't always welcomed. And now that we're in this time, people are like, we got to figure this out. We're going in a new direction. What is this going to look like? How are we going to deal with this? And these people like me who think outside of the box, now they're the ones being sought after to solve these problems. So I think a lot of people, what we really need to think about is, number one, what our employees need, how we're going to give it to them, but also these visionaries who exist, tap into them, tap into their out of the box thinking, because that can really be beneficial as we move forward.
Yeah, and I tell you, I mean, this conversation can go on for days, particularly when it comes to getting people to like what's funny, and me and Karen, we laugh about this all the time. The quotes that we used to say kind of anecdotally and all the rest of those things, it's real life now, right? Getting comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Saying like literally we're engaging life, that it's like, I don't like it. I don't like it. Somebody else do it. And like literally every day, like as leaders, like we're in our organizations. Like, I mean, I had a conversation last week. I had to admit I was wrong about something. I do this for a living, but it felt like swallowing glass. It was like, I'm not right all the time. And so this idea of thinking outside the box, that's another one. Oh my gosh, I used to want to throw something at people to like think outside the box. Like, it's already a box. Why do I have to think outside of it? And so it's these things that now are real life for people. And they're having a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual reaction. But it's like, oh, that's what that is. And so now it's like, oh, we weren't allowed to talk about it. But now, oh, it's another one of those things. And so I think I love that we're having these conversations now, because it's not new. It's just now we're saying it out loud. And so those are the things that, as we create spaces for leaders, I think the other space is the co-creation of those safe senior leader spaces, to get them around each other and their peers to say, we don't know. And so I know there are coaching groups and all these things, executive groups. I know Karen has them. I know I have them, and I know Spring, you probably have them too, where just to be able to co-create these spaces. So I would love people to make sure that they know how to get in contact with you, so you can come in and partner with their organizations. And so how do people get a hold of you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Spring Richardson Perry.
Mm.
On Facebook, the same thing, Spring Richardson Perry. Instagram is at Springy Springtime. It's Springy _ Springtime. My company also has pages on each of those sites as well. Time to Spring Forward. And then also, I have a podcast, the Spring Forward podcast. Check it out. Always talking about organizational efficiency, but thinking outside of the box as well, and how, some of these themes that are coming up, how you can manage them in your organization. And I'm always here to help, to partner with you guys to spring your business forward into excellence. That is my tagline: spring forward into excellence. We are not going to see excellence remaining in this box. We have to be able to think outside of it, think big picture, think long term. Where are we going? Because there are some major shifts happening. And we want to stay ahead of those things and keep up with them. We don't want to be on the back end. We want to be on the front end of it. So
Love it, love it, love it, love it. So, Karen, any closing comments after this tip of the iceberg conversation today?
I just want to echo the need to spring forward, and the time is now to do that. We definitely want to leverage this moment in time with all of these shifting environmental, shifting, uh, technology. This is a moment that we can use to move forward. We don't want to go backwards. We don't. I mean, we can't go backwards. I mean, what would we go backwards to? We're not going to go back to the time where people literally just work 9 to 5 and got a pension, and could work for the same company for their whole career. Like that's not a reality that's going to come back into play. We have to learn how to adapt and make it work better for people, because it's not working for the majority of people now. So yeah, leaders step up and figure out what it is you have to do to adapt and serve your people better so that you can get the performance you need and want.
Love it. I love it. And so, y'all, as always, we make that call, the conscious call for other speakers, other practitioners. If you're not a part of the C3 community, we'll make sure you know how to find us with our link below Karen's name. Join the C3 and grab the mic, like Spring did. And of course, September, we already got it earmarked. We're going to talk about speaking engagements, how to find them. But make sure you connect with Spring across her social media platforms, and make sure that you continue to lead well and be conscious while you're at it. So until next time, folks, we'll see y'all later.
Thank you, Spring.
Thank you, Spring.
Bye.